They threatened her dogs, her land, her peace. They saw a lone woman, an easy target. They never saw Captain Amara Cruz coming, this ex-Special Ops K-9 officer. With her elite dogs, Valor and Echo, is about to turn their world of corruption upside down. When bullies push too far, they awaken a fury they can't control. Witness the explosive takedown you won't believe. Don't miss how justice gets unleashed. This is a formal notice of violation. Ms. Cruz, your animals are a blight on this community's aesthetic standards. Calvin Roark's voice, slick and condescending, cut through the quiet morning air of Amara's sprawling ranch. He held a crisp white envelope with an air of self-importance. His 5 stone-faced associates in matching black shirts fanned out behind him like a low-budget intimidation squad. Amara Cruz, her sun-browned skin hinting at her Latina heritage, leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed. Her dark eyes, usually reflecting the calm of her secluded life, narrowed slightly. At 30-something, her lean, powerful build spoke of a discipline long ingrained, a stark contrast to Roark's soft, entitled paunch. Beside her, Valor, a magnificent black shepherd, lifted his head, a low rumble, an almost inaudible warning in his chest. Echo, his sable counterpart, positioned slightly behind Amara, remained still, but his intelligent eyes missed nothing, flicking from Roark to his men. Aesthetic standards, Amara repeated, her voice deceptively mild. My dogs, Mr. Roark. Or is it my fence that's offending your delicate sensibilities today? Perhaps the color of my barn. This wasn't their first interaction. Since Roark had maneuvered his way into the presidency of the newly formed Homeowners Association, an entity Amara had pointedly refused to join. Given her property predated its existence by decades, he'd made it his mission to harass her. His community was a recent, encroaching development of cookie-cutter houses that was slowly eating away at the open land she cherished. Roark's smile was a thin, unpleasant line. The regulations are quite clear. Ms. Cruz, Section 4, Subsection B, animals deemed aggressive or of a size and nature unsuitable for suburban harmony are prohibited. Your German shepherds, particularly given their robust appearance, clearly fall into this category. They make residents uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Amara's eyebrow arched. The only residents they've ever made uncomfortable are the coyotes trying to get at my chickens. Or perhaps the occasional door-to-door salesman who doesn't understand no soliciting. She knew exactly what this was about. Roark had made no secret of his desire to see her ranch subdivided into more profitable plots for his developer cronies. Her land, a significant parcel bordering the new development, was a prime target. He'd started with petty complaints, the height of her grass, the unsightly nature of her working farm equipment. Now, he was escalating. It's not just their appearance. Ms. Cruz. Roark pressed on, clearly enjoying himself. We've had reports, barking, intimidating behavior. Children are frightened. Amara snorted softly. The only child nearby was young Leo, her neighbor's son from the adjacent older farm, who regularly came over to play fetch with Valor and Echo, showering them with affection. Reports from whom, Roark, your imaginary friends who share your vision of a concrete paradise. My dogs are highly trained, disciplined animals, more disciplined than some people I know. One of Roark's goons shifted his weight, his hand inching towards his hip, where a bulky object under his shirt suggested something more than a cell phone. Echo's head came up a fraction, his gaze locking onto the movement with unnerving intensity. The man froze. Roark, however, seemed oblivious or perhaps deliberately dismissive of the subtle currents of tension. Training is irrelevant if they violate community standards. This notice gives you 7 days to rehome the animals. Failure to comply will result in further action, including forcible removal and fines. He extended the envelope. Amara didn't move to take it. Forcible removal? You and what army, Roark? This is private property. And the last I checked, My dogs haven't set a paw off my land to bother anyone in your sterile little enclave. The HOA has jurisdiction, Rourke stated, his voice hardening. We are empowered to enforce the community covenants for the good of all residents. He particularly emphasized all residents, his gaze flicking with disdain towards Amara, a clear insinuation that she, with her different background and self-sufficient lifestyle, was not truly part of his all. His known dislike for strong women, especially those who didn't kowtow to his perceived authority, was palpable. Your covenants don't apply to me. Rourke, this ranch has been here for 70 years. Your HOA is barely 70 days old. Amara's voice remained even, but an undercurrent of steel was now evident. She had hoped for a peaceful, quiet life after leaving the service. A life where her past, the things she had seen and done as a K-9 officer in a special operations unit, could remain just that, the past. She had sought solace in the routines of the farm, in the unwavering loyalty of Valor and Echo, her companions, her protectors, the only beings who truly understood the silent language of command and trust they had forged in far more dangerous terrains than this. Rourke's face flushed a dull red. Legal interpretations can be debated in court, Miss Cruz, but in the meantime, this order stands. We are the authority here. He took a deliberate step forward, attempting to push the envelope into her hand. It was a small movement, but it was enough. Before Rourke's hand could make contact, Echo emitted a low, guttural growl that was pure, controlled menace. It wasn't a bark of alarm, but a statement of intent. His eyes, fixed on Rourke's outstretched hand, burned with a cold fire. The air crackled. Rourke stopped dead, his fingers a mere inch from Amara. The bravado drained from his face, replaced by a flicker of genuine apprehension. His 5 associates, who had been affecting an air of bored thuggery, suddenly looked a lot less confident. They'd seen dogs before, sure, but there was something in the focused stillness of these 2 shepherds, in the almost imperceptible shift in Amara's stance. That screamed danger. Amara had barely moved, her expression unreadable. She hadn't issued a verbal command. She hadn't needed to. Her dogs were an extension of her will, conditioned by years of elite training to read her slightest cues, her very intent. Rourke and his men didn't know that the pets they were threatening were not just companions, but highly skilled operatives. They didn't know that Amara Cruz wasn't just a reclusive rancher, but a former captain who had led K-9 teams into situations that would make Rourke's contrived HOA power plays look like a childish tantrum. They didn't know that the very stance Echo had taken was a preparatory move, a hair's breadth from a takedown sequence that could neutralize a threat in under 4 seconds. I suggest, Amara said, her voice dropping to a quiet, lethal calm, that you and your associates remove yourselves from my property. Now. The envelope fluttered from Rourke's suddenly nerveless fingers, landing softly in the dust by his polished shoe. He stared at Echo, then at Amara, a new, unwelcome understanding dawning in his eyes. He had come expecting a solitary woman, easily intimidated. He had found something else entirely, something that his carefully constructed sense of authority hadn't prepared him for. The air was thick with unspoken threat, the sun beating down on a confrontation that had just crossed an invisible line. The problem hadn't just begun. It had detonated. The retreat was ignominious. Rourke, flustered and visibly shaken, stumbled back a step, nearly tripping over his own feet. His eyes darted between Amara, whose expression remained a mask of cold composure, and the 2 shepherds, both now standing fully, radiating an aura of disciplined aggression that was far more terrifying than any random barking cur. The 5 henchmen, their earlier swagger completely gone, shuffled awkwardly, their gazes avoiding Amara's, focusing instead on the dogs as if expecting them to launch at any second. One of them, the one Echo had initially clocked, unconsciously touched his side again, a nervous tick betraying his unease. This isn't over, Cruz. Rourke managed, his voice a hoarse whisper that lacked any of its earlier conviction. He bent stiffly to retrieve the fallen envelope, his movements jerky. "You'll be hearing from our lawyers. The HOA will not be intimidated." "I'm not the one doing the intimidating." "Rourke," Amara replied, her tone still low and steady. "I'm protecting my property and my family, which, by the way, includes Valor and Echo. You'd do well to remember that." Without another word, Rourke turned and practically fled towards his oversized SUV parked by the main gate, his entourage scrambling after him. The vehicle kicked up a cloud of dust as it sped away. A messy, undignified exit that contrasted sharply with their confident arrival. Amara watched them go, the tension slowly ebbing from her shoulders. She let out a long breath, a silent command that both Valor and Echo instantly understood. They relaxed from their alert stance, though their eyes remained watchful on the disappearing vehicle. Valor nudged his head against her hand, and she stroked his fur, her touch reassuring. Echo sat, panting lightly, his gaze returning to Amara, seeking her approval. "Good boys," she murmured, scratching Echo behind the ears. "Very good boys." But the peace they had shattered was not so easily restored. The encounter had left a bitter taste, a residue of unease that settled heavily in the quiet of the ranch. This was a direct assault, more brazen than Rourke's previous attempts. He was no longer content with veiled threats and petty rule-bending. He was actively trying to dismantle her life here, starting with the beings she loved most. The incident rippled through Amara's carefully constructed solitude. The next few days were fraught with a new kind of watchfulness. She found herself scanning the perimeter of her property more often, her ears straining for unfamiliar engine sounds. Valor and Echo, sensing her disquiet, became her constant shadows. More alert than usual, their protective instincts heightened. Even the familiar routines of the ranch, mending fences, tending to the small vegetable garden, the quiet companionship of her animals, felt underscored by a subtle current of anxiety. Rourke wasn't bluffing about lawyers. Apparently, a week later, a registered letter arrived, not from a local solicitor, but from a high-powered law firm based downtown, the kind that specialized in corporate litigation and hostile takeovers. The letter was dense with legalese, citing obscure county ordinances and newly minted HOA bylaws, all twisted to paint Amara as a negligent and dangerous animal owner, a threat to public safety. It demanded the immediate removal of the dogs and threatened a lawsuit seeking not only their confiscation, but also significant financial damages for alleged devaluation of community property and infliction of emotional distress upon HOA members. Emotional distress, to see, Amara scoffed, reading the letter at her kitchen table, Valor's head resting on her lap. "The only emotional distressor around here is mine, dealing with these vultures." But the legal jargon, the sheer audacity of the claims, and the reputation of the law firm behind it were designed to intimidate. And she knew it. This was an escalation, a shift from playground bullying to a serious, well-funded legal assault. Rourke was clearly willing to spend money, or more likely, HOA money, to get what he wanted. The impact wasn't just on Amara. Young Leo, who usually bounded over with unrestrained enthusiasm, became hesitant. His parents, good people but conflict-averse, had clearly heard about the confrontation. They'd likely been spoken to by Rourke or his proxies, warned about associating with the problem resident. Leo still came, but his visits were shorter, his laughter less free. He'd cast anxious glances toward the road, and Amara's heart ached for the boy, for the loss of his innocent joy. Another casualty of Rourke's greed. One afternoon, as Amara was repairing a section of fence near the road, a sleek black car she didn't recognize slowed as it passed her property. The tinted windows prevented her from seeing the occupants, but she felt their gaze. It lingered too long, an assessing, predatory feel that sent a chill down her spine. They didn't stop, didn't wave, they just observed, then sped up and disappeared. It was a subtle act, perhaps meaningless, but in the current climate, it felt like a silent threat, a reminder that she was being watched. The twist came not from a direct confrontation, but from an unexpected source. A few days after the lawyer's letter, Amara noticed a small, inexpensive drone hovering high above her back pasture, near the training area she rarely used but kept maintained, a series of low obstacles, weave poles, and a scent wall. It was too small to be a commercial survey drone, too deliberate in its movements to be a hobbyist's toy. It was observing. Her blood ran cold. That training area was where she occasionally ran Valor and Echo through advanced drills. Not just basic obedience, but complex search patterns, directed retrieves, and even some of the old protection work sequences. It was muscle memory for them, a way to keep their minds sharp and their bond with her strong. It was nothing aggressive, always controlled, but to an uninformed or malicious eye, it could be easily misrepresented. She brought the dogs inside immediately. The drone lingered for another 10 minutes, then zipped away towards Rourke's development. The implications were sickening. They weren't just trying to bully her with false accusations and legal threats. They were actively spying, looking for anything they could twist, anything to build their fraudulent case that her dogs were dangerous weapons rather than loyal companions. That evening, as dusk settled, Amara sat on her porch, the lawyer's letter on the table beside her, now creased from multiple readings. Valor lay at her feet, Echo a few paces away. Scanning the tree line, the usual symphony of crickets and distant coyotes was overlaid by a new sound, the faint, almost imperceptible whine of another drone, this one equipped with a tiny, blinking red light, hovering just beyond her property line, a malevolent firefly in the gathering dark. Rourke wasn't just trying to take her dogs. He was trying to strip away her peace, her privacy, her very way of life, using tactics that felt uncomfortably familiar, reminiscent of surveillance operations she'd once been a part of, but never the target. He was escalating far beyond what she had anticipated. He wanted a war, it seemed. What he still didn't understand was that Amara Cruz knew how to fight, and he had just given her a reason to access a part of herself she had tried very hard to leave behind. The hidden truth of her capabilities, her training, her resilience, was about to become Calvin Rourke's biggest problem. The HOA was not just targeting a reclusive rancher, they were provoking a warrior. The sight of the second drone, a malevolent red eye blinking in the twilight, didn't just anger Amara, it solidified a cold resolve within her. This was no longer just harassment, it was a campaign. Rourke wasn't just a petty tyrant, he was a methodical aggressor, and Amara knew how to deal with aggressors. The peace she had sought was a fragile thing, easily shattered by men like him. But beneath the desire for tranquility lay a core of tempered steel, forged in crucibles Rourke couldn't even imagine. The next morning, before sunrise, Amara was up, Valor and Echo, sensing the shift in her demeanor. The quiet intensity that now replaced her troubled vigilance, were alert and ready, their movements economical, their focus absolute, instead of her usual ranch chores. Amara retrieved a locked pelican case from the back of her closet. Inside, nestled in custom foam, was equipment she hadn't touched in years, compact high-resolution binoculars with night vision capabilities, a handheld spectrum analyzer, a directional antenna, and a ruggedized tablet loaded with software that was definitely not standard civilian issue. She didn't own a counter-drone weapon. Those were heavily restricted. But she didn't need to shoot it down. She needed information, operating from the cover of her barn's hayloft, which offered a commanding view of her property and the adjacent development. She began her own surveillance. It didn't take long. The drone operator, likely one of Rourke's less sophisticated goons, was careless. The control signal, unencrypted and relatively weak, was easily picked up by her spectrum analyzer. Triangulating the source using the directional antenna took her another hour of patient scanning. The signal originated from a vacant house at the edge of Rourke's development, one of the newer constructions still listed as for sale. "Got you," she murmured, a grim satisfaction in her eyes. Valor, lying beside her, thumped his tail once, as if in agreement. She didn't act immediately. Her training emphasized patience, observation, and choosing the right moment. For the next 2 days, she meticulously documented the drone's activity, flight times, patterns, altitudes, and the direction its camera was primarily focused. She also noted the comings and goings at the vacant house. It was Rourke's men, all right, sloppy and unprofessional, treating it like a clubhouse. They left pizza boxes outside, smoked where they shouldn't, and were generally incautious, simultaneously. Amara made a call, not to the police. She knew Rourke likely had local officials in his pocket, or at least believed he did. Instead, she called an old friend, Marcus Hex Relander, a former signals intelligence specialist from her unit, now a highly successful cybersecurity consultant. Amara blast from the past. Everything okay? Cap, Hex's voice was warm, instantly familiar. Getting there. Hex, listen, I've got a situation. HOA trouble, but it's escalated. Surveillance, drones, the works. She quickly outlined the situation, her tone professional, concise. Hex whistled. Playing dirty. Are they? These HOA commandos getting bolder every year. What do you need? Information. Primarily Calvin Rourke, his HOA, Harmony Creek Estates, Homeowners Association. Anything you can dig up. Financials, connections, any irregularities. And I need it quiet. Consider it done, Cap. Give me 48 hours. And Amara, watch your 6. Always, she replied, while Hex worked his magic in the digital realm. Amara turned her attention to the legal front. The threatening letter from the high-powered law firm was designed to cow her into submission. She wouldn't be cowed, but she also knew she couldn't ignore it. Her modest savings wouldn't last long against a legal team like that. But then she remembered Maria Sanchez, a pro bono lawyer she'd met once at a veterans outreach event, a firebrand who specialized in fighting corporate overreach and defending the underdog. Maria's office was small, above a bustling bakery in a less glamorous part of the city, but her reputation for tenacity was formidable. Maria listened intently as Amara laid out the facts, her expression growing sterner with every detail of Rourke's harassment and the drone surveillance. She examined the HOA letter, the photographs Amara had taken of the drone, and Amara's meticulous logs. This isn't just about dogs, is it? Maria said, her sharp eyes meeting Amara's. This is a land grab, pure and simple, and they're using classic intimidation tactics. The drone surveillance is a blatant violation of your privacy, possibly illegal depending on how they're using the footage. We can fight this, Amara. These guys count on people folding. They don't count on people fighting back smart. For the first time in weeks, Amara felt a surge of hope. What's our first move? We file a countersuit, Maria said, a predatory glint in her eye. For harassment, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We also file a restraining order against Rourke and his associates. Citing the surveillance and their previous threatening behavior, we make them uncomfortable. The power dynamic began to subtly shift. Rourke, accustomed to being the one dictating terms, was suddenly on the receiving end of legal paperwork. A process server, a burly ex-Marine Maria often used, delivered the restraining order summons to Rourke personally, right in the middle of an HOA meeting where he was likely boasting about his imminent victory over the recalcitrant rancher. Witnesses later reported Rourke's face turned a shade of purple, usually reserved for prize-winning eggplants. Meanwhile, Hex called back, "Bingo, Cap. Your boy Rourke is not as clean as his crisp shirts. Harmony Creek Estates HOA, more like Harmony Crook Estates. The financials are a mess. Looks like he's co-mingling HOA funds with his private company. Rourke Development Group. Significant payments from the HOA to his company for management services at massively inflated rates. And get this, the land your ranch sits on, it's zoned agricultural, but there's a pending application with the county, submitted anonymously, to rezone it for high-density residential, if approved. Its value skyrockets. Rourke's Development Group is listed as the interested party in a separate, Heavily redacted preliminary planning document I managed to unearth. So, it's exactly what I suspected, Amara said, her voice tight. He's trying to force me out to get my land rezoned and make a killing. Looks that way, Hex confirmed. And one more thing. Those complaints about your dogs, I cross-referenced the names and addresses listed in some HOA meeting minutes I acquired. Most of them are either Rourke's direct employees or individuals who received suspiciously favorable deals on their properties in Harmony Creek. Coincidence? I think not. This was the ammunition she needed. It wasn't just her word against Rourke's anymore. There was a pattern of behavior, a clear financial motive, and evidence of unethical, potentially illegal, activities. The revelation that truly galvanized the situation, however, came from an unexpected quarter. Young Leo, emboldened by the news that Amara was fighting back his parents, while still nervous, were beginning to admire Amara's resilience. Confessed something to her. He'd seen one of Rourke's men, the same one Echo had intimidated, trying to lure Valor and Echo towards the fence with meat a few days before the first official complaint. Leo had been too scared to say anything then. He'd even seen the man try to film them with his phone when they barked at him for approaching their territory uninvited. And then, the anonymous live streamer mentioned in the initial character descriptions made their debut. It turned out to be a tech-savvy teenager living in the Harmony Creek development, fed up with Rourke's dictatorial style and the ever-increasing HOA fees for non-existent amenities. Using a hidden camera and a burner account, they began broadcasting snippets of Rourke's more unhinged moments during HOA meetings. His disdainful comments about outsiders, and eventually, footage of Rourke's men still lurking near Amara's property line. Even after the restraining order was served, though they were now trying to be more discreet, the stream, initially obscure, started gaining traction among local community groups tired of HOA abuses. The narrative was shifting. Rourke was no longer the concerned community leader. He was increasingly looking like a bully and a fraud. Amara, armed with Hex's intel, Leo's testimony, Maria's legal strategy, and the unexpected support of an anonymous digital whistleblower, felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She was no longer just reacting. She was anticipating, maneuvering. She had drawn a line in the dust of her ranch, and Rourke, in his arrogance, had crossed it. He thought he was playing a simple game of intimidation. He was about to find out he'd stumbled into a far more complex arena, against an opponent whose definition of engagement was something he was utterly unprepared for. The hidden truths were surfacing, and the balance of power was beginning to tip. The anonymous live stream, dubbed Rourke's Racket by its growing audience, became a local sensation. The teenage whistleblower, emboldened by the positive community response and shielded by their anonymity, began releasing more damaging footage, Rourke berating elderly residents for minor infractions, openly discussing plans to sanitize the neighborhood of undesirables, a category that clearly included Amara, and even a clandestine recording of him attempting to pressure a county zoning official. Public opinion, initially swayed by Rourke's carefully crafted image of a civic-minded leader, turned sharply against him. Maria Sanchez leveraged this public outcry masterfully. She presented the mounting evidence, Hex's financial forensics, Leo's eyewitness account now formally documented, the drone logs, and curated clips from Rourke's Racket to the district attorney's office, urging them to investigate Rourke for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The restraining order against Rourke and his primary enforcers was granted, making their continued presence near Amara's property a clear violation of a court order. Rourke, however, was not one to concede defeat gracefully. Cornered and exposed, he became more erratic, more desperate. He saw his meticulously constructed empire of petty tyranny crumbling, his lucrative land grabs slipping through his fingers. His hatred for Amara, the woman who had defied him and exposed him, intensified into a dangerous obsession. He still had one card he thought he could play: the initial, albeit fraudulent, community violation notice concerning Valor and Echo. He believed if he could just get the dogs out of the picture, he could still somehow salvage his plan, discredit Amara, and reassert his dominance. He decided on a final, reckless gamble, ignoring the restraining order. Convinced of his own untouchability, Rourke gathered his 5 core henchmen, the ones still loyal or perhaps too deeply implicated to back out. He wouldn't use the easily traceable HOA funds this time. He paid them in gouache, promising a hefty bonus if they succeeded. Their mission, a nighttime raid on Amara's ranch to seize Valor and Echo. He didn't care how they did it, just that the dogs were gone by morning. He envisioned a scenario where the dangerous animals had escaped or been relocated for public safety before the authorities could intervene further in what he still delusionally considered an HOA matter. But Amara was prepared. Her years in special operations had taught her to anticipate an enemy's desperation. Hex had provided her with discreet, military-grade perimeter sensors, which she'd camouflaged around her property. And her boys, Valor and Echo, were more than just pets. They were a highly attuned early warning system. Late one moonless night, the sensors tripped. A silent alert pinged on Amara's ruggedized tablet. Simultaneously, Valor, sleeping at the foot of her bed, lifted his head, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Echo, in his usual spot by the hallway door, was instantly on his feet, silent and poised. Amara didn't turn on the lights. Moving with practiced silence, she donned dark clothing, strapped on a tactical vest containing non-lethal deterrents, a high-intensity strobe, a powerful sonic emitter, items perfectly legal for civilian ownership but devastatingly effective, and clipped a small comm unit to her ear, patching her into a secure line with Hex, who was monitoring remotely. "They're here," she whispered. 6 of them, including Quark, standard wedge formation, approaching from the south fence line. Predictable. Police have been notified of a breach of restraining order and suspected home invasion. ETA 7 to 10 minutes. Rural response time. Hex's voice came back, calm and professional. "You good, Cap?" "Peachy," Amara replied, a grim smile touching her lips. Showtime. Rourke and his men, armed with catch poles and heavy tranquilizer guns they clearly had no proper training to use, cut through the wire fence, believing they were operating under the cloak of darkness and surprise. They fanned out, moving towards the barn where they assumed the dogs were kenneled. That was their first mistake. Valor and Echo weren't in the barn. They were with Amara, flanking her as she slipped out the back door and melted into the shadows of her own property. She knew this land like the back of her hand, every dip, every tree, every patch of darkness. Rourke and his men were blundering through unfamiliar territory. Valor, Echo, shot in shadow. Amara whispered, giving the German command for silent, parallel movement. The dogs moved like wraiths, staying low, using cover. Perfectly synchronized with her. As the intruders neared the dark silhouette of the barn, Amara made her move. From a concealed position, she activated the sonic emitter, aiming it directly at the group. The device emitted a high-frequency sound, inaudible to some but painfully disorienting to others, particularly those with sensitive hearing or ill intent. 2 of the henchmen clutched their heads, crying out in surprise and pain, their night vision ruined. "What the hell was that?" one yelled, stumbling. Rourke, further back, barked, "It's nothing. Keep moving. Get the damn dogs." Amara then triggered the high-intensity strobe, mounted on a pole near the barn, and aimed at their approach path. The darkness erupted in a series of blinding, disorienting flashes. The intruders were caught in the open, momentarily blinded, their coordination shattered. "Now," Amara commanded, not with a shout, but with a sharp, clear tone that cut through the chaos. "Valor, Pack and Echo, Stellan, attack while hold, apprehend, guard." The commands were precise, ingrained through years of training. Valor, a dark blur, launched himself not at Rourke, but at the closest henchman fumbling with a tranquilizer gun. He didn't savage, he executed a perfect takedown, hitting the man's center mass, knocking him off his feet, his deep bark a terrifying pronouncement of dominance as he stood over the downed man, preventing him from rising. Echo, with lightning speed, targeted the man who had previously tried to lure them and film them, the one who had also been carrying what looked like a heavy club. Echo didn't bite, not yet. He performed a Stellan maneuver, a circling, feinting, barking display of controlled aggression that pinned the man in place, his eyes wide with terror, the club dropping from his nerveless fingers. Echo's snarls were inches from his face, a promise of swift retribution if he moved. The remaining three henchmen, including a stunned and rapidly panicking Rourke, froze. They had expected to grab a couple of dogs. They found themselves in a coordinated, terrifyingly efficient counter-ambush. These weren't just farm dogs. This was a canine unit in action. "Calvin Rourke," Amara's voice rang out, amplified slightly by a small megaphone function on her comm unit, making her sound omnipresent in the darkness. "You are in violation of a court order. You are trespassing. You are attempting felony animal theft and assault. I suggest you and your men drop your equipment and assume a non-threatening position. Police are en route." One by one, the remaining henchmen dropped their catch poles and tranquilizer guns. The fight was gone from them, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding of just how badly they had miscalculated. Rourke, however, sputtered. This is an outrage. Those animals are dangerous. You assaulted us." Suddenly, from the darkness behind him, not from Amara's direction, came a new sound, the distinct click of a camera phone, followed by a bright flash, the teenage live streamer. Rourke's racket, alerted by the commotion and probably by Hex, had found a vantage point. "Gotcha, Mr. Rourke. Live and in color, violating a restraining order and trying to dognap. My subscribers are gonna love this." Rourke's face, illuminated by the phone's flash, was a mask of disbelief and fury. He was trapped. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The arrival of the sheriff's deputies was almost an anticlimax. They found Rourke and his 5 thoroughly demoralized henchmen rounded up, with Valor and Echo calmly holding 2 of them at bay while Amara stood watch, her expression unyielding. The dropped catch poles, tranquilizer guns, and wire cutters told their own story. The live streamer, still filming, provided an immediate, enthusiastic eyewitness account. The villain's fall was swift and public. Rourke and his men were arrested. The evidence Amara, Hex, Maria, and the anonymous streamer had gathered was overwhelming. The DA's investigation into Rourke's finances and HOA dealings accelerated, uncovering a rat's nest of corruption. Rourke faced multiple charges, from violating the restraining order and conspiracy to commit theft, to fraud and embezzlement. His reign of HOA terror was over. The Harmony Creek Estates HOA was thrown into disarray, eventually being restructured under state oversight, with many of Rourke's bogus regulations rescinded. Amara Cruz didn't become a local hero in the headline-grabbing sense. She shied away from the media attention that followed Rourke's arrest, preferring the restored peace of her ranch. But her stand had inspired others. Several other communities facing similar HOA overreach began to organize, citing her case as an example. The rezoning application for her land was quietly withdrawn. Young Leo resumed his visits, his laughter echoing freely across the ranch once more as he played with Valor and Echo, who were now, if possible, even more beloved by the local children who'd followed the story. Maria Sanchez won her countersuit handily, securing a judgment against Rourke that helped Amara cover her legal fees and repair the damage to her fence. Life on the ranch returned to its rhythm, but it was a new kind of peace, one that had been tested and defended. Amara sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky, Valor and Echo at her feet, their quiet presence a comforting reassurance. She had tried to leave her past behind, but when her sanctuary was threatened, she had rediscovered the strength and skills that past had forged. She hadn't sought the fight, but she had met it with the unwavering resolve of a warrior protecting her own. The quiet rancher and her 2 aesthetic blights had faced down corruption and greed, and they had won. Her bond with Valor and Echo, once a source of Rourke's malicious accusations, was now a testament to loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of a true canine handler. The quiet click of their tags as they shifted beside her was the sound of victory and the sound of peace, finally reclaimed.